Nieto was recently elected, and he's vowed to defend freedom of expression, even though the pre-party historically hasn't been about that. Do you see his administration making changes, or do you think it will in the long run?
I think it's really, I can't really answer that, but I can say that the journalists that I talk to, and in particular the journalist at SETA, you know, I've Sergio has publicly said that he doesn't hold out a lot of hope for this new administration to implement laws that would protect journalists. You know, I think one of the issues that journalists always bring up is they say, you know, you can it's great to have laws prosecuting crimes against journalists. Our problem is that that's an after the fact. That all happens after the fact. So, you know, if you kill a journalist and then that murderer, that killer is prosecuted, great, but you still have a dead journalist. So, you know, that's their big issue. I think what they're wondering, and a lot of people are wondering, is what can we do to actually change the climate? What can we do to create greater security, to strengthen media outlets? You know, and there are a number of different proposals on the table. Is it funding for news outlets in Mexico? Is it internationalization of some of those news outlets? You know, are there partnerships between Mexican news outlets and international organizations? You know, what can be done to create greater visibility for Mexican journalists, and also to create maybe a set of practices that are more transparent? There are also crooked journalists in Mexico. It's not to say that all journalists are, you know, are acting ethically. There are a lot of there are cases of journalists taking bribes, of journalists acting as spokespeople for particular organized crime groups. So that's happening as well. And part of the difficulty of, you know, that organizations like the Committee to Protect Journalists have, and their people in country, is going and investigating those crimes against journalists and determining, well, was this an attack against someone for their written work, or could this have been a personal matter? Was this person on the take in some way? It's a very difficult thing to investigate. But in the end, you know, there is a climate of fear, there is a climate of self-censorship, and there are very real attacks against responsible journalists, and that needs to be addressed in a big way, and it hasn't happened yet with this new administration.
The underlying argument for freedom of expression is that without being able to have a safe environment for journalists, you can't really have a safe environment for democracy, and you can't achieve other rights. How do you specifically see this happening in Mexico?
I think I think Mexico has a very unique history. The PRI, which ruled Mexico for 70 years and has now returned to power, worked in this very autocratic, authoritarian style in a way that many people believe to be, and effectively was, and not democratic in any ways. And right now there's a lot of opposition to this new government. There's student movements, there's social movements, and organized crime has created a climate where the press is very wary of reporting on stories of corruption or stories of organized crime, and it's put links to the government. So democracy is at risk under these circumstances. But even within this climate, there are people who continue to report on organized crime and corruption in ways that are very brave and very smart. And I think that's something that you see at SETA. SETA by no means is the only Mexican news outlet doing this, but they are one of the few that has done it consistently and that has done it in a difficult space, in a kind of in a slice of the border that in the past was very difficult to work in.